Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing super well. I missed you guys so much. I took some time off because I got married. I feel like I keep mentioning this on like both channels and on Instagram and TikTok. Like I'm so tired of repeating it, but it's the truth. That's why I was a little bit MIA. I got married and then I went off to go celebrate my honeymoon. It was all just absolutely beautiful. You guys can check out my Instagram if you guys want to see some photos of the wedding and just like, some extra content about that. But it was so amazing. It was a really nice break, but I am so excited to be back. Today we have another fun video. I think everyone has been feeling a little nostalgic lately. They've been kind of bringing back the low-rise jeans and flip phones and things like that. So I just thought that in theme with that trend, we needed to talk about a Y2K classic called When a Stranger Calls. The movie is actually a remake of a 1979 movie that was actually based on a 1960s folk story. The movie just reminds me of my childhood. I remember my sisters and I always playing this movie in my mom's minivan, or anytime we had sleepovers with our friends or with our cousins, we would play this movie. I don't know why we were just so obsessed with it, considering we were very little and we were just obsessed with like horror movies and we just loved how spooky this was. So it just really reminds me of my childhood. It really is such a classic movie. I love the house design, the quietness in the movie, and the suspense. Honestly, the entire time you're watching this movie, you truly feel like someone is watching you as well. The movie stars Camilla Bell, who plays Jill the babysitter, and she did a really good job acting in it, especially considering that a lot of the movie is just her speaking on the phone. So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Thank you guys so much for being here and for supporting my new channel. If you guys are looking for a true crime video, you guys can go check out my main channel. I just uploaded something over there, so make sure to go check out that video. Oh, also, I'm not going to be baking in today's video because I feel like I need a break from like brownies and sweets and all of this stuff, so I don't have anything to bake. I have a poppy today as my sweet treat, so I'm not baking anything in today's video, but if you guys do want me to bake something in the next video, definitely let me know. Maybe I can make like Christmas brownies or like some type of Christmas treat. But anyways, enough to chatter. Let's jump right into the video. The movie starts off with a black scene and the sound of a phone ringing, which is quickly answered by a girl saying, "Hello?" A man replies and says, "Is this Alice?" "No, I think you got the wrong number." "Oh, well, what's your name?" he replies in a creepy, intrigued voice. "This is Stacy. Who is this?" the girl says, sounding a bit concerned. The black screen fades into the outside of a large suburban home at night with only one light upstairs on in the entire house. We hear Stacy, still on the phone, say, "Hello? Hello?" But there's no reply. Directly behind the house, we see that there's a big fair going on. There's children running around all over the place. There's families there. People are holding balloons and just having fun. The fair is quite busy. It seems like the entire town is celebrating, and the house that Stacy is in is literally right there next to the fair. So there's a bunch of people right next to the house. We hear the phone ring again, and we hear the same girl Stacy say, "Hello?" No response. "Who is this?" she says, but again, no response. Suddenly, we see a man whose face is hidden by the shadows walking his dog on the street in front of the fair. He passes by an older couple who is sitting on their front porch across the street from the fair. The older man says, "Hey, Mr. Wilson," and waves to him. The man in the shadows replies, "Hello, Dennis." After this, we see a row of bungalow houses. Behind them, we can see the Ferris wheel from the fair. A mother stands on her front porch and calls out, "AJ, Charlie, Catherine." There's no answer from anyone, so she calls out again, "AJ, Charlie." Still not hearing anything, she walks towards the street looking around as she calls out again for AJ, Charlie, and Catherine. We see the man with the dog return home and close the wire gate in front of his house in what appears to be the same neighborhood. Next, we see a bunch of children continuing to have fun at the fair, and we see that same large suburban home with only one light on, and we hear the phone ring once again. Stacy picks up and says, "Hello? Hello?" But when nobody replies, she sounds more concerned and says, "Please stop calling me." After this, we see a wind chime hanging in front of the house. Everything seems still when suddenly a shadowy figure runs across the lawn. The fair continues going on, and then we can see the outside of the house again. This time, all of the lights are off. We take a glance at the window, and Stacy turns on the light. As soon as the light turns on, we see that a man is standing in front of the window, hiding. He jumps up and attacks Stacy, and we can hear her screaming and fighting for her life. Her screams actually blend in with the screams of the people and the children at the fair having fun on all of the roller coasters. The screams drown out when someone lets go of their red balloon and it floats up into the sky. In the next scene, it's daytime, and we see a red balloon caught on a fence next to a rural road heading into the town. 3 children happily run across this road, and then then a police car speeds by with its sirens on. We see the children run into the fair that looks like it's closed for the daytime, and on the opposite end of the fair, we see a large group of people looking and just multiple police officers all standing next to the large suburban house. The house now has yellow tape all around it, and a cop named Lewis walks an older detective named Hines up to the house. Detective Hines asks Lewis, "What's going on?" "Well, we were patrolling less than a block away when the call came in." "Who made the call?" "I'm not sure, sir." "Where'd you find them?" "Upstairs bedroom." They walk up to the porch where there are more cops, and then they walk into the house where, again, it's just filled with cops just collecting evidence, dusting for fingerprints, and just trying to collect everything at this crime scene. Lewis points Detective Hines in the direction further into the house. Hines asks, "What did the coroner say?" "He's still here waiting through it all," Lewis says. Detective Hines seems confused by this, and as they go upstairs, Lewis hands him some gloves. "What was the murder weapon?" "That's just it." "What?" "There wasn't one," Lewis replies. Detective Hines slowly approaches a bedroom door that has drawings taped to it, clearly done by a young child. He opens a door, and all we see is his face looking around the room, and he just looks absolutely heartbroken. He looks very sick and disturbed just looking around at this crime scene. As he's looking around, we can hear the sounds of the screaming and the gore that happened last night. Tears build in his eyes, and Detective Hines can't just look anymore, and he closes the door. He steps outside for some fresh air, and he actually has to sit down after the horrific scene that he just saw. Behind him, several police carry out multiple body bags. It's clear that this was a very violent crime and that the bodies of the kids and Stacy were torn apart. Now we jump over to a town that's about 100 miles away, and we meet Jill, a teenage girl running in her school's gym upper track level. Below her, the boys' gym class plays basketball. Jill runs past her coach, who clicks the timer at 25 seconds, and Jill stops running and catches her breath. "Sorry, coach. You're not concentrating, Jill. You can make 24 seconds. We both know you can. Remember, focus on something in the distance and run for it like nothing else exists," Jill finishes for her coach. Jill looks down at the boys playing basketball, and she focuses on one boy, specifically named Bobby, who's also looking up at her. They kind of stare at each other for a couple of seconds, and then the coach calls a practice and everyone heads to the showers. After freshening up from practice, Jill heads to her locker and she sneaks a peek at her flip phone, hiding it from a teacher who walks by. She tries to call someone, but an operator says, "I'm sorry, your service has been temporarily interrupted. If this is an emergency, please hang up and dial 911, meaning she's out of minutes. Now remember, this was back in 2006 when you had to reload minutes to call or text people, so it was a very expensive thing back then. On the back of Jill's phone is a photo of her and two other girls. Despite them smiling in the picture and appearing to be close, Jill rips off the photo just as Bobby approaches her. She sees him and she slams her locker shut and walks away. "Come on, Jill, are you just gonna ignore me forever?" he asks as he follows her around. "Sounds good to me," she replies as she keeps walking. "I tried to call you last night, but your cell phone was tweaked. We need to talk." "Bobby, we've talked. 74 minutes yesterday, 124 the day before, and 256 the day before that. Just hear me out." "I saw you with her. What else is there to discuss?" Jill says. "She kissed me. I keep telling you that. I barely even remember it." "Oh, so you let her kiss you." "Later, Bobby," Jill says as she walks away, leaving Bobby behind. Jill walks into an art class where Scarlett, one of the girls from the photo on the back of her phone, sits painting. Jill sits down across from her, and Scarlett asks Jill if she hung tough, and Jill says that she's not going to give in. As Scarlett continues to paint, she asks Jill, "What time are you picking us up tonight?" "I'm not picking anyone up. I'm grounded." "All because you went over your minutes?" "Yep, all because of that jerk," Jill says. Just then, the blonde girl from the photo on the phone named Tiffany comes up and says, "Hey guys." Immediately we can tell that there's tension between them. Jill doesn't say hi to her, she doesn't even look at her, and Scarlett kind of awkwardly just sits there until she finally breaks the silence and says, "Guys, this is so high school." "We are in high school," Jill replies. Tiffany just kind of scoffs and just walks away. Jill and Scarlett continue their conversation, and Jill explains that her parents are making her pay off her minutes by babysitting tonight. Scarlett tries to comfort her, saying, "Well, who needs a bonfire party anyway? It's just a bunch of skanks and jerks acting like idiots, right?" Jill kind of forces a smile, agreeing, but she's clearly a little sad about the situation. She wishes that she could go to the school bonfire tonight and be with her friends, but instead, she's stuck babysitting on a Friday night. The school day finally ends, and we can see some of the students outside of the school packing up their cars with coolers, clearly getting ready to go to this bonfire and just enjoy the night. Jill sees this as she walks out of the school to leave for the day and just gets even more annoyed at the situation. She gets in the car with her dad, and he says, "So mom was able to get the tickets. I was kind of hoping they'd be sold out. Just be glad you're not going. It's Baroque chamber music. Jill just kind of looks out the window, ignoring her dad. Well, since the concert isn't over until after midnight, Dr. Mandrakis will drive you home, okay? I could have at least driven myself, Dad, Jill says. Jill, you went over your minutes by 800 minutes. Do you know how much that cost us? At least you could have waited until after 8 p.m. I know, I always do. Except this time you didn't. That's not fair, Dad. You know why. I know, but still. Her dad explains that she can't have a phone or her car for an entire month, and besides that, he doesn't want her driving home alone that late at night when the Mandrakis house is so far away. We see that their car is driving on a secluded road on a mountain, and there's really nothing around. There's no houses, no cars, like really no neighbors. Wherever they're going, it's completely isolated. The dad says, wow, they really live pretty far out here. You're gonna be okay out here all alone? Depends if they have TiVo, Jill replies. They pull up to the house and it's just like beautiful. It's this beautiful modern house made of wood and glass sitting on this lake surrounded by a forest and mountains. It's a stunning house. I actually saw some people build it in The Sims. Like I was laughing watching these like Sims tutorials. I mean, the entire view is just absolutely breathtaking and it's so close to sunlight, so the lighting just makes it look even better. They drive into the gate and the dad parks the car. Call us if you need anything, okay? The dad says. Jill smiles and her dad kisses her on the cheek goodbye. She gets up out of the car and walks up to the wall that surrounds the house and sees that the door is already open. She turns back and yells at her dad, "You guys have fun. Say it like you mean it," he jokes. Jill smiles and walks through the door and closes it behind her. This door actually leads her to the front patio, which has a beautiful view of the lake. Jill takes in this view as she walks up to the front door and rings the doorbell. Dr. Mandrakis opens up. "Hi, I'm the babysitter." "Oh, right, yes, come in," he says. Jill walks into the house and Dr. Mandrakis leads her through the modern home. "Sorry to rush, but I think we're running a little bit late. Honey, have you seen the keys?" he says as they walk into the living room. "Shh, don't yell, I just put the kids to sleep," his wife Kelly says as she walks down in her date night dress. The living room has floor-to-ceiling windows that look out onto the lake, and again, it's just absolutely beautiful. Now, despite its beauty, it doesn't really look like kids live there. There's like this huge sculpture, there's a grand piano, and the furniture just looks really expensive, and the staircase doesn't even have a hand railing. So yes, it's a beautiful home, but it definitely seems a little bit cold. Kelly shakes Jill's hand and introduces herself as her husband helps her put on her necklace. "Nice to meet you both," Jill says with a smile. "We were so thrilled to find a babysitter at the last minute. You come highly recommended by the Thompsons." "Well, they're great," Jill says. "Well, if you can handle them, then we're gonna be a cakewalk," Kelly says. While the husband goes off to find the keys, Kelly shows Jill around the house. They have this black cat who's just like sitting there looking out at the window. Jill starts to pet him and Kelly says, "That's Chester, he'll probably be there all night." Jill looks up at what's beyond the window and it's this beautiful courtyard pond in the middle of the house that has like all of these plants surrounding it. It has like birds and fish and it just looks so beautiful and peaceful. Like imagine having an indoor garden with like a pond. Like it's insane. They continue walking into the kitchen and the lights automatically turn on as they enter. "You'll get used to that," Kelly says before showing Jill a list of contacts and emergency numbers and the home phone. "Oh, you can also help yourself to anything in the fridge. I remember babysitting. Food's the best part," Kelly says. Now Kelly seems like really sweet and just like beautiful and just like a really sharp woman. I mean, it seems like she's living the dream. She has this beautiful house. She has a rich husband. I mean, this is just like everyone's goals. Anyways, they continue on with the tour. "Oh, and if you hear any banging around upstairs, don't worry. That's her live-in, Rosa. She has a room on the 3rd floor. She sometimes leaves in the evening to go take care of her mother who's been pretty sick recently," Kelly says. They make their way back into the main living room and Kelly asks her husband if they're missing anything. "The guest house?" he asks. Kelly laughs and walks Jill to one of the large windows and shows her a guest house that's across the lake. "Our son, who's in college, stays out there most weekends. Not that he ever calls to let us know that he's coming," Kelly explains. "You have a son in college?" "From my first marriage," Tim explains. "Okay, so our dinner reservation is at 8, but if we're up for it, we might catch a movie afterwards, which would put us home at around midnight. Is that okay with you?" Kelly asks. "That's fine." "Okay, anything else?" The children?" asked Jill. Tim and Kelly laugh. "First bedroom at the top of the landing. They're both getting over the flu. I mean, we had the hardest time getting them to sleep, so whatever you do, please try not to wake them," Kelly says. Jill nods and follows the parents to the front door. "Oh, we also have an alarm system. I'll write the code down for you right here." Kelly grabs a piece of paper and she writes the 4-digit alarm code 8734 down on a piece of paper. The parents start to walk out the front door and Tim quickly puts in the house code, turning the house's alarm on. The alarm seems to be kind of like the standard one that a lot of people have in their home. Like it's basically the one that you just like click in. It's nothing too high tech or anything like that. Just make yourself at home, Tim says. Okay, Jill replies. The couple leaves and Jill is now all alone. She walks into the living room, drops her school bag, and lays down on the couch, taking in the quietness and the beauty of the home. The evening progresses and it's now dark outside. Jill looks out the window into the night and then walks to the couch, sits down, and picks up one of the many remotes. She tries to turn on the TV, but nothing happens. She picks up another remote, and when she presses a button, the fireplace suddenly turns on and Jill just quickly turns it off. She grabs another remote, and this one turns on the speaker, blasting opera music, and it also turns on the TV into just like this loud static sound. Jill quickly turns them both off, and then she takes a couple of steps towards the stairs and kind of just waits for a moment, likely trying to see if she woke up the children. She doesn't hear anything, so she goes back to the couch and takes out her book bag, giving up on the idea of turning on the television. She opens up one of the books and she tries to study and just kind of get some homework done, but she gets distracted by a door in the hallway. Curious, she goes over to the door and she opens it. It's a bedroom. She steps in and out of the room smiling because again, the lights turn on automatically when you enter and when you leave. So she's having fun with the lights and she starts working her way into the bedroom and then into the bathroom. She tests out a perfume and then she opens a drawer which has very shiny and expensive jewelry in it. She tries on a necklace and she kind of is posing in the mirror and just kind of pretending this is her house, this is her jewelry, this is her stuff. Oh, thank you, I just bought them, Jill says in a British accent, clearly playing dress up with Kelly's fancy belongings. She notices two doors inside the bathroom, so she opens one of the doors, closes it, and then she goes to another door and just lets out a happy sigh when she sees that it's the wife's closet. She grabs a dress and starts kind of playing around with the dress, holding it up to herself, again pretending that she's Kelly, when suddenly there's a pretty loud sound of a door opening. Jill rushes to put the dress back into the closet, she puts away the necklace, she puts everything back in order, and then she runs back into the living room and just sits down on the couch pretending that she was reading a book the entire time. Hello? Jill calls out, Dr. Mandrakis? But there's no reply. Jill looks a little confused, but then there's a quiet bump sound upstairs. Rosa? Jill calls out. She closes her book and she stands up. Rosa. There's no reply, but there is another bump sound, this time coming from the main floor. Jill follows the sound. Rosa, it's Jill the babysitter. Still, there's no reply. Jill is starting to get scared. She starts walking towards the other end of the house, towards the indoor garden, and that's when she finally spots Rosa, who is wearing her maid's uniform, feeding the fish in the pond. Rosa waves to her and says hello, and Jill smiles back and also waves. Whew. Thankfully, it was just Rosa. Jill returns to the living room and she looks at the house phone, which has a cord, and she's about to pick it up when suddenly it starts ringing. Jill answers the phone. Hello, Mandrakis residence, but the person on the other end hangs up. Okay, that was weird. Jill goes back to her book when she sort of senses something. She has that feeling like someone else is there, someone besides Rosa. She gets up and she goes to look in another room. Hello, she says as she looks around. Suddenly, the cat Chester jumps out and meows at her. Jill jumps back and she sighs, realizing that she's being paranoid for no reason. I mean, this is a nice house. Rose is there. The kids are asleep. What could go wrong? So the night keeps going and Jill sits on the couch talking on the phone. What are the kids like? Her friend Scarlett asks over the phone. I don't know. They were asleep when I got here. And the house? Pretty amazing. You should see her closet. It's bigger than my room. Food? Haven't checked that out yet, Jill replies. Scarlett adds, listen, I'm not sure if I should tell you this, but what? Jill interrupts. The jerk called me. He wants your number over there. Well, did you give it to him? No, because then he would call you. It's okay, you can give it to him, Jill says. I'm smelling weakness, Scarlett says. I'm not being weak, Jill replies. Scarlett tells her that the real person she should be talking to is Tiffany. Jill ignores that comment and asks Scarlett when she's heading over to the bonfire, and Scarlett says that she's about to head out. Want me to swing by first? No, it's okay, but give Bobby the number, alright? Okay, well, don't say I didn't warn you, Scarlett adds. Fine, I've been warned, Jill says as she smiles and hangs up the phone. Almost instantly after that, the house alarm goes off. Jill gets up, she walks to the front door, and she grabs a paper with the code written on it and enters it into the system. She leaves a piece of paper on top of the alarm when suddenly the phone rings. She walks into the living room and answers it. Hello? Hi, this is CTR Protection. We just registered your alarm. Is there an emergency or do you need assistance? No, not at all. I'm just a babysitter. I think the maid set off the alarm. May I have the password, please? Password? I only have a code, Jill says. I'll have to check with the Mandrakis to confirm your identity. What is your name? Jill Johnson. Jill waits on the phone for a moment and she kind of glances upstairs to look at the kids' bedroom. Okay, Miss Johnson, Mrs. Mandrak confirmed. Good night. Jill says thank you and she hangs up the phone. She looks up at the stairs again just to check on the children, but is interrupted by the phone ringing. Hello? The other line sounds a little bit staticky. Hello? Is someone there? Jill asks. Is everything okay? We just got a call from the alarm company, Kelly asks. Oh, everything's fine. The alarm just went off. I don't know how many times I've written that number down for Rosa. Did it wake up the children? I don't think so. They're still quiet. Do you want me to go check? No, trust me. You would know if they were awake. She tells her to call her if she needs anything else and they hang up the phone. Jill walks towards the courtyard just to check in and see if that was actually Rosa that left or just to see what's going on. Rosa, is everything okay? But when Jill gets to the window that looks out to it, she sees that Rosa isn't there, but her cart with all her cleaning supplies still are. Jill starts to get a little bit nervous when suddenly the mist sprinklers turn on and startle her. When they turn off a few moments later, Jill calls out to Rosa again, but there's no reply. And then the phone rings again. Jill walks back into the living room and answers it. Is everything okay? A man on the other end asks. Jill looks confused. Dr. Mandrakis? No response. Whoever that was hung up the phone. Jill is just so confused at this point. I mean, who was that? She sits down on the couch and she looks over her shoulder out to the window as the wind howls. A little bit later, Jill is still sitting on this couch doing her homework when the phone rings again. Hello? Hello? Jill asks. Hey, a male voice says. Who is this? Jill replies. What are you wearing? Combat boots and a parka, you jerk. Who is this? But there's no answer. Bobby, is that you? There's just silence. Yeah, you know, whoever this is, it's not funny. Yeah, it is, the male voice says with a laugh and just hangs up. Assholes, Jill says to herself and puts down the phone, clearly annoyed at this prank call. She then hears the sound of a door and decides to pick up a fire poker for protection. I mean, at this point, she is feeling very paranoid. She's in this huge house. She feels all alone. I mean, there's weird noises. People are prank calling her. The alarm is going off. Like, it's just chaotic. So she picks up the fire poker for protection and then she hears another sound and determined, she walks around the house slowly to investigate. Again, there's another sound. She keeps cautiously walking and as she walks by the courtyard, the bird's wings flapping do make a lot of sound, but they definitely weren't the cause of the sound that she heard. There's a rattling sound and she looks down to see that her hand is shaking so much that it was causing her fire poker to rattle against the kitchen counter. She builds a confidence to get into the kitchen, ready to face whatever made the sounds, but when she steps in and the lights turn on, she sees that she's all alone. She looks kind of back and forth. She kind of looks everywhere, just wondering like, what is going on? She walks and stands by the fridge, looking into the dark hallway when suddenly there's a noise that startles her and causes her to drop her fire poker. The noise immediately happens again and she opens a freezer, realizing that the sound was the ice machine. She just lets out this big deep breath. She grabs a popsicle and she's definitely feeling more safer now. I mean, again, all of this is just in her head. So she gets her popsicle, she pikes up the fire poker and then heads back into the living room. As she enters the room, the phone rings. She puts a fire poker back before answering, placing her popsicle on a napkin next to the phone. Hello? Jill says. The other end is silent and then suddenly someone says, hello, from behind her. Jill screams and she turns around. Leaning against the wall is her friend Tiffany, who closes her flip phone. Now we can tell that Tiffany is ready to go out and again she's clearly like a lot more confident compared to Jill, who's more sweet, a little bit introverted and kind of soft-spoken. My God, the look on your face, Tiffany says. What the hell are you doing here? Jill says as she hangs up the phone. Oh my God, could this house be any more awesome? Tiffany, you don't just do this to people. Why didn't you call? I just did, she says, waving her phone. Well, how'd you get in? The garage door was open. What? Jill says as she walks off. Tiffany follows her and asks, what's the big deal? Jill opens a side door and sure enough, the garage is wide open. Jill presses a button and closes the garage. She walks back into the kitchen where Tiffany is already looking inside the fridge. I've been getting really weird prank phone calls all night, so then don't answer the phone. I'm sure they have voicemail. Well, maybe I'm expecting a call, Jill says. Oh, from Bobby? What's it to you? Well, I don't know, maybe because I'm your best friend? That's a little hard to remember after what you did, Jill says as she walks into the living room. Tiffany kind of rolls her eyes and she follows Jill. How many times do I have to say that I'm sorry? It was just one kiss, and besides, you know what tequila does to me. So don't drink. Fine, I'll try. Face it, Tiffany, you've been crushing on Bobby ever since the 9th grade. Yeah, I have, and it's because he asked me out first. I was with him for one day and then he spotted you, Tiffany says as she sits sits down on the couch next to Jill. She then adds, I never got my first kiss with him, so I figured I had it coming. Now we're even. You know that's the lamest excuse I've ever heard, Jill says. I'm a You know that, I know that, everyone knows that, so let's do a truth shot. I bet they have a killer bar, Tiffany says as she runs over to the bar in the living room. You're quitting, remember, Jill says. Tiffany starts looking at all of the different bottles and she decides to grab a bottle of tequila. Didn't we just talk about you not drinking, Tiffany? You were serious, she says. Okay, you gotta go, I'm babysitting, Jill says as she goes over to Tiffany, who rolls her eyes and puts down the bottle. Okay, fine, I'll leave, but at least come with me to the bonfire just for a couple of hours. I mean, the kids are asleep, right? Tiffany says as they both walk towards the front door. Tiffany's like, okay, I was kidding. Like, of course, we're not going to leave the kids alone. And Jill says bye and she hands her her purse. Bye, call me, Tiffany says. And Jill walks her walk around the front deck, turn, blow a kiss before turning the corner to leave. Jill closes the door, locks it, and walks back into the living room. We follow Tiffany, who is walking towards her car. It's very windy outside, and as she's walking, she hears sounds coming from behind her. She stops, she turns around and doesn't see anyone, but it sounds like loud footsteps are walking towards her. She rushes to her car and she digs in her purse for her keys. She's struggling to find her keys, she's moving everything in her bag, and then when she finally finds them, she drops the keys on the ground. They actually land underneath her car, so now she has to bend down. She's feeling around for the keys. I mean, she is just feeling really scared at this point. She finally grabs the keys, she puts the keys into her car door, opens it, and then immediately locks the doors. She's kind of just sitting there being like, okay, am I imagining this? Like, did I imagine someone chasing after me? She's taking a moment, she's looking over her shoulders, but she doesn't see anything. Nervous, she puts on her seatbelt, puts her keys in the ignition, but when she turns the key, her engine won't start. She tries again and again, but it still isn't starting. She keeps trying, she's panicking, and finally the car turns on. She looks over her shoulder and starts to drive backwards towards the gate. As she approaches it, however, she sees that a tree branch has fallen in front of the gate, blocking her from leaving. She looks around but doesn't see anyone, and she builds up the courage to get out of the car and move the branch. She tries her best to move the tree, but it looks pretty heavy, and she can feel that someone is there watching her and getting closer and closer to her. Meanwhile, Jill is walking around the living room. She's looking for her popsicle, finally finds it and sees that the popsicle has completely melted next to the phone. She's trying to find a bin to throw it away in, and as she's doing this, she hears knocking coming from the front door. Tiffany, come on, she says as she walks towards the door. We can see the shadow of someone's feet under the door as they continue to knock and knock. This isn't funny, Jill says as she unlocks the door and opens it, but to her surprise, no one's there. Jill takes a step outside. Tiffany? She calls out. It's silent. After realizing that no one is there, Jill closes the door, she locks it, and then she turns on the alarm system, and then she also adds this extra lock that was at the top of the door. Then the phone rings, and she walks into the living room and picks it up. Hello? There's some static on the other end. Mandrakis residence? Jill, is that you? Bobby asks, and we can see that Bobby is calling her from his cell phone at the bonfire party. Bobby? Jill says. Move around, we've got some bad connection, she tells him. There's still a lot of static on his end, but she hears him say, Jill? Yeah, it's me. Listen, have you been calling me? She actually has to ask him a couple of times because again, the connection is really bad, and Bobby says, well, Cody prank called you, but I made him stop. Just once? Yeah, I think so. Bobby, listen to me, this is very important. I won't get mad. Has he called me more than once? Bobby says he doesn't know, but that he can go ask him. She then hears him say, hey, Cody, but there's more static, and then the line cuts out. Jill redials him, but then the operator says, the person you are trying to reach is out of range. Frustrated, Jill sits down on the couch, but then the phone immediately rings again. But this time, she decides to answer it from the kitchen phone, which is cordless and has caller ID. She looks at the phone and it says that the call is coming from Madison Tiffany. She picks up the phone and starts walking as she says, Tiffany, I know it's you. I can see your name on the caller ID, genius. But instead of Tiffany replying back, a man replies saying, this isn't Tiffany. Jill slows down and stops walking. Who is this? Who is this? The man says and exhales in a very creepy way. Jill is just getting more and more nervous. Cody? Who's Cody? You better cut this out, Jill says just before the man hangs up. Jill is definitely freaked out at this point and she takes some slow, deep breaths as she sits down. She calls her friend Scarlett, who is enjoying herself at the party. Hello? Scarlett, it's me, Jill. Jill? Can you hear me? Barely. I mean, no one can really get any service up here. Jill starts to explain that she needs to talk to Scarlett, but then Scarlett cuts her off and says, did Tiffany come up to talk to you? Yeah, she came by. Well, did you kiss and make up? But Jill still can't answer because the line goes staticky and then the call drops. Jill quickly calls Scarlett back, but again, she gets the same message from the operator saying that the person that she's trying to reach is out of range. Jill then calls her dad, but he doesn't pick up either, and she leaves him a voicemail telling him to call her at the Mandrakis residence when he gets the chance. She goes into the kitchen and she looks at the list of emergency contacts and she dials Kelly, the mom, but also gets her voicemail. I mean, it seems like no one is picking up the phone tonight. So she leaves the mom a message saying, hi Mrs. Mandrakis, it's me, Jill, calling. Could you give me a call when you get the chance? Don't worry, everything's fine. And she says this in like a very sweet and calm voice. She looks at the list again and she calls a restaurant that the parents are having dinner at. Someone from the restaurant picks up the phone and Jill asks to talk to Dr. Mandrakis, but the restaurant tells her that they left 40 minutes ago, meaning that they were probably already at the movies now. She thanks them and then she hangs up the phone. She looks at the list of contacts again and then decides to dial 0 for the operator and she puts the phone to her ear. Operator, how may I direct your call? Can I speak with the police? Is this an emergency? Yes, she says confidently, but then she corrects herself and says, no, not really. Would you like me to connect you? Yes, please. The phone rings and then an officer at the police department answers and asks how he can help. Jill explains, I've been getting weird phone calls about every 15 minutes from a man and it's really starting to scare me. From an anonymous caller? The officer asks. Yes. The officer then continues to ask her questions like, has he threatened you? Has he been using obscene language? Like, what's going on? But Jill says that no, that sometimes he doesn't even say anything. The officer tells her that there's really nothing they can do unless there's a real threat. He suggests having a friend coming to stay with her, but she explains that they can't because they're all at the school bonfire. That's when she notices that Rosa's car is still in the driveway. Jill sounds a little bit relieved and she tells the officer that she had thought the housekeeper had left, but that she guessed she hasn't. The officer asks her if she feels better with the two of them there, and Jill says, actually, I feel pretty stupid. The officer tells her to not worry, that there's a lot of freaks out there, so she has a right to call, and if she needs anything, she can call him back, that his name is Officer Burrows and that he will be there all night. She thanks him and then hangs up the phone. After this, she looks down a dark hallway and calls out a couple of times, Rosa? I mean, at this point, she's thinking, okay, maybe all this noise is Rosa. Maybe she's coming in and out of the house. I mean, where's Rosa? She goes back to the list of contacts and she dials Rosa's cell phone. It starts to ring and she can hear Rosa's cell phone ring from somewhere within the house. Jill starts to look around. She's following the sound of the ringtone and she's calling out for Rosa, but doesn't receive any response and the call goes straight to voicemail. Jill checks in the laundry room and there's a load of laundry on, but no Rosa. She calls Rosa again and tries to follow the sound of her cell phone ringing. As the phone rings, Jill looks out onto the courtyard because again, that's the last place where she saw Rosa, but she isn't there. Rosa's phone again goes to voicemail. Jill dials Rosa one more time and continues to follow the sound of her cell phone ringing down the hallway. She puts her ear to her door and it sounds like the phone is inside. She goes into the room, which just has like an ironing board, a rack of some clothes, and an empty shelf, which has Rosa's purse on it. Jill grabs a purse, she looks through it, and she finds Rosa's cell phone. She pulls out the phone and she's kind of just sitting there wondering, like, why is Rosa's phone here? Why is her purse here, but Rosa isn't here? As she's dwelling on this, the door starts slowly closing behind her with a creak, and it looks like a man is hiding behind the door. Jill jumps and she turns around, but thankfully it wasn't a man. It was just like a black jacket and like a hat on it, so it looked like the shadow of a man. Jill just lets out this big sigh and she leaves the room. Then the house phone rings and Jill answers the cordless phone saying, hello, have you checked the children? The man says. Jill doesn't reply, but instead she hangs up the phone. Now at this point she's looking very, very concerned. She doesn't understand what is going on and she decides to leave the phone in the living room and she starts to walk upstairs. When she gets to the second floor, there's this large and just kind of like oddly posed sculpture on the landing. Jill walks around and then she sees a door covered with kids art. This must be the kids' bedroom. She slowly opens the door and sees that the two children are peacefully sleeping in bed. She closes the door and walks back downstairs. Before she's in the living room, the phone starts ringing again. She answers it and says, "Hello?" And the man asks, "How are the children?" Terrified, Jill slowly drops the phone. I mean, she's standing there and she's looking around the room in a panic. He can see her. This man is watching her. She runs, she closes all of the curtains in the living room before sitting on the ground in front of the couch and calls 911. Elan Valley Police, says an officer. "He can see me," Jill yells. "I'm sorry?" It's Jill, the girl who called before about the man who can, and she's just so flustered that she can't even get the words out, but she explains to the officer that the man called again and that he's outside watching her through the windows. The officer asks if she saw him and Jill says no, but that she knows he can see her. I mean, he knew when she went upstairs to check on the children. The officer tells her to take a deep breath and asks where the housekeeper is, but Jill says that she found her purse and her cell phone, but didn't find her. The officer asks questions like, is the house locked up? Is there an alarm system? Do you have all the doors locked? Jill says yes, and he tells her, okay, you're inside the house. You're safe. If he wanted to break in, he wouldn't be calling you. But he must want something, Jill says, still panicked. Listen to me, miss. He's just some asshole trying to hassle you. There's nothing we can do. What? Jill says. Look, I can alert the phone company so when he calls again, we can try and trace the phone call. I can also get my watch commander to authorize a GPS trace if he's calling from a cell phone. The officer asks her to verify the home address, but Jill doesn't even know it because her dad drove her there. She starts looking around trying to find like some mail or like some piece of paper that has the house address, and she finds a magazine and tells him that the house address is 3378 Old Mill Road. The officer's like, okay, I know where that is, and he says if he calls again, try to keep the man on the line for at least 60 seconds. That way they can track him. Jill's like, I can't do that because he doesn't stay on the phone for more than a few seconds. The officer's like, okay, let me see if I can get a car out to you, but if I do, it's going to take at least 20 minutes. Think you'll be okay until then? Yes, Jill says quietly. The officer says, okay, call us back if you need anything, and they hang up the phone. Jill then just sits there, afraid. Some time has passed and Jill is still sitting there in the same spot. The phone suddenly rings and she turns on her timer on her watch and then answers the phone. Hello? Jill says. It's silent. It's you, isn't it? She hears the sound and says, no, wait, don't hang up. If you keep on calling, it must mean you want to talk, right? But the man doesn't say anything. Jill looks at her timer and then gets up and walks to a window. Is it me that you're calling for, or are you calling for the Mandrakis? But the man hangs up the phone. Jill looks at her watch, but it was only 53 seconds. She needs 60 seconds to track him down. She looks out the window and she sees that there's a light on in the guest house. Maybe their son from college is home. She goes into the kitchen and she gets a number for the guest house phone. She dials, but it goes straight to the voicemail that the son Todd has recorded. Jill walks to the window and she watches the guest house as she leaves him a voicemail saying, hey, if you and Rosa are in there, could you please pick up the phone or come to the main house? Someone's been calling me all night and I'm really scared. I called the police, so I'm wondering if you can come here and wait until they arrive. She leaves a message and then hangs up the phone, and she continues watching the guest house and she can see a figure walk by the window. Someone is clearly there. She goes into the kitchen, she grabs a candlestick holder to use as a weapon and then disarms the alarm system and goes outside holding a flashlight into the windy night, locking the door behind her. She heads towards the guest house with the cordless phone clipped to her back pocket. She runs with the flashlight through the woods over a small bridge and then runs up to the guest house, which is up one flight of stairs. She knocks on the door and then just walks inside. Todd, she calls out, but there's no reply or sign of anyone, so she starts walking around the guest house and she's calling out for him, but it doesn't look like anyone was there. The bed is perfectly made, there's no dishes anywhere. I mean, it literally looks like this guest house has been untouched. Jill starts to panic because she literally saw someone walking around in here from the main house. So if it wasn't Todd or Rosa, who was it? Suddenly she hears a banging sound and she turns and looks completely terrified. She's about to leave when suddenly the guest house phone rings. She doesn't answer it, she just lets it go to voicemail and the recording plays out loud. Jill runs over to the phone and she starts the timer. It's you, isn't it? She says into the phone. How did you get this number? How did you know I'm in here? Did you see me out there? Why are you doing this to me? The man never replies and hangs up the phone. Jill looks at her timer. 1 minute and 2 seconds. Got you, Jill says. But then she looks down and realizes that the house phone is still in her back pocket. He called the wrong phone line. He called the guest house phone, not the main house phone, so police can't trace the call. She goes to the window and she looks outside to the main house. She sees that a light is turned on the top floor. Rosa, she says to herself. Jill grabs the flashlight and she runs out of the guest house. She runs through the same path that she had to. She runs over the bridge. I mean, she's running as fast as she can. She even runs into a tree branch, causing her to drop her flashlight, but she doesn't stop running to pick it up. She finally makes it back into the main house, and she looks around in a panic as she puts the key back in the door and unlocks it. The alarm goes off, and she locks the door and then puts the security code in. "Rosa, it's Jill," she calls out as she walks upstairs. Suddenly, the phone rings and she jumps. She starts the timer again and she picks up. "Hello?" she asks as she continues slowly walking up the stairs. "I know it's you," she says as she looks around the second floor landing. "You know, I'm not gonna be here for much longer. Dr. Mandrakis and his wife are coming home soon." Still, the man doesn't say anything. "Why won't you answer me? I know you're there. I can hear you breathing." She turns the corner slowly and sees the staircase to the third floor. She checks her watch and slowly starts to walk up the steps. "Is that what you wanted? To scare me? Because if that's what you wanted, you can stop now because it really worked." Still, he doesn't say anything back. Jill gets to the top of the stairs and she slowly opens a door and looks inside. No one is inside Rosa's room. Either way, she walks into the room. "You don't know who I am or where I live, and Dr. Mandrakis is going to take me home as soon as he gets here. Or maybe even the police will take me home." She continues trying to just buy time, and she's looking at her timer as she walks into Rosa's bathroom. While she's doing this, she can hear that the man is still on the phone, just breathing into it, saying nothing. "Please, I mean, there's a reason you keep calling me. I mean, if you're not trying to scare me, what do you want?" There's a moment of silence, and then the man suddenly says, "Your blood all over me." Jill immediately hangs up the phone. She's feeling disgusted. She's feeling violated. I mean, what a horrifying thing to hear. She can also hear that the water is running in Rosa's bathroom. Maybe Rosa's taking a shower? She decides to open the bathroom door and she says, "Rosa?" She continues walking into the bathroom. The shower is running and the curtain is closed. She pulls back the curtain, but no one is there. She turns off the water, and as she's doing that, the phone rings again. Jill looks down at the caller ID, which reads "unknown caller." She answers the phone. "Stop calling me, you sick." But before she can finish her sentence, she's cut off by the police officer who says, "Jill, listen to me. We traced the call. It's coming from inside the house. Did you hear me? It's coming from inside the house." Jill's face just immediately drops in sheer terror. She drops the phone, but we can still hear the officer saying, "You need to get out of there right now." And then a cell phone starts ringing behind her. And then Jill slowly turns around and she sees her friend Tiffany dead on the floor next to her cell phone. Jill screams. She drops to the floor, panicked. She's just sitting there in shock. I mean, her friend is dead. She quickly pulls herself up and then rushes out of the bathroom, rushes out of Rosa's room. I mean, this means that the man was just there and put Tiffany's body on the floor while Jill was turning off the shower. Terrified, she slowly moves down the stairs, afraid of what might be around the corner. She tries to look around while she quietly breathes deeply and cautiously walks down to the landing. She checks around the corners, but doesn't see anyone. She's just kind of standing there at the top of the stairs leading to the living room, and then she looks back at the kids' room and then down at the stairs again. She doesn't really know what to do. Like, should she run for it? Should she grab the kids? Like, what is she supposed to do? But she decides to go get the kids. She walks into the kids' room and quietly opens a door and closes it behind her. "Kids, come on," she quietly says as she approaches her bed. She pulls back the blankets, but on one bed, it's just pillows underneath. She goes to the other bed and she pulls back the blanket, and again, it's just pillows. The kids aren't here. She panics and just starts looking around, and she sees that there is a door open that's attached to a playroom. She goes inside the room and she sees this large toy chest and slowly opens it. Inside, both the children are in there, terrified and hiding. "I'm Jill, I'm the babysitter," she tells them as she helps them climb out. Suddenly, the dinosaur nightlight in the kids' room turns on, meaning someone is in there. Jill tells the kids to stay right there, and she slowly walks back into the room, and as she's looking around, she sees that someone moved the dresser to block the door. Someone else is inside this room. She looks around, but she doesn't see anyone. Suddenly, she looks up and she sees that a man is hiding in the ceiling beams. His face is covered in shadows. She runs back into the playroom and closes the door as the man jumps down from the ceiling. The children start crying. I mean, they clearly realize what is going on, and Jill's trying to think as quickly as she can. So she starts to close the door, which doesn't have a lock, with the cord from a lamp, and she attaches it to a hanger. That way he can't open the door. The man starts banging and banging on the door, and the children are just screaming, absolutely terrified. Jill is trying trying to close the door and she tells the kids, get out through that window right there. Meanwhile, the man gets the door open enough to get his arm in, but Jill uses all of her strength to keep it closed. The kids climb out of the window onto a tree that's inside the courtyard. The man is so close to getting the door open, so Jill quickly climbs out through the window onto the tree as the children try to open the door that's inside the courtyard, but it's locked. The man finally breaks into the playroom and he's kind of just standing there watching them escape. Jill is climbing down the tree when a branch breaks and she falls onto the ground. From the window, the man looks down at them and Jill tries to get up. She takes the kids' hands and she tries to lead them out, but there's really nowhere to go. As she's just standing there trying to think of a plan, they're looking around at the automatic lights that show where the man is moving throughout the house. Please, no, she says as she realizes that he's walking towards the stairs. She grabs the children, she holds them, and she's still just looking at the stairs, waiting to see the man appear, but instead, it's Chester the cat that walks onto the stairs. Jill looks relieved for a second, but then realizes she doesn't know where the man is. She turns around and the man is standing there right behind her with his hands up on the glass window. She screams and she backs up. He starts moving his hands down the window and they squeak because his hands are against the glass window and he's just staring at them from outside the courtyard. Jill panics and she decides to press a button to turn on the mist sprinklers, making it harder for him to see them. And they try to get away, but again, there's really nowhere for them to go. The door inside the courtyard that leads them to the house is locked, so they're trapped. She finds this little space that's just big enough for the kids to hide in, and she puts them in there and she's like, okay, get in there, like be quiet and hide. As for her, she doesn't fit in there. She starts to look around to find her own hiding spot, and that's when she decides to just get in the pond and hide under this wooden walkway bridge as a man slowly unlocks the door and walks inside the courtyard. She can literally see his feet as he's walking around searching for her. She goes underneath the water to hide even more, and that's when she sees Rosa's dead body right in front of her under the water. Jill lets out a little scream and she kind of covers her mouth to keep him from hearing her, and she quickly pokes out her head to take a deep breath, and now the man is walking right on top of the wooden bridge. Jill sees one of the children stick their head out of their hiding spot, and she motions for them to go, to get out of here. The children come out of the hiding spot and they start to rush out of the courtyard when suddenly the mist sprinklers turn off. One of the children steps on like a rock or something that makes a crunching sound, and that's when the man turns and looks at them. The kids scream and they start running into the house. They run up to the front door and they try to open it, but they can't because they can't reach the lock on top of the door. They start jumping and trying to reach for it, but they're just way too short. Suddenly, Jill hears a thud sound right near her, and that's when the man reaches his arm down into the water and tries to grab her. He found her. She screams and she's trying to avoid him, but he keeps trying to grab her underneath the water, so she goes all the way under. That way he can't reach her. However, she has to come up for air, so she goes up and then goes back down again. She then puts her foot on one side of the walkway bridge and she flips it, causing the man to fall in the pond with her. Jill rushes to get out of the water before him, but he catches up to her at the door and grabs her hair from behind as she struggles to close the door on him. She finally gets it closed, but her hair is still on the other side of the door as he's holding onto it, so she's stuck. She manages to lock the door, but again, she's still stuck by her hair. She sees that the kids are at the front door trying to reach the lock, and determined to save them, she pulls her head away from the door with a scream, and a chunk of her hair is ripped out. The man has her hair in his hand, and he's just banging on the windows now, frustrated that she managed to escape and that now he's locked inside the courtyard. Jill manages to make it to the front door. She opens the top lock, but the children aren't there anymore. She starts running around the room. Kids, it's Jill, where are you? She looks all around, going to the parents' bedroom, to the kitchen. She goes everywhere, but she can't find them. She runs back into the main living room and sees that now there's a bird sitting on one of the steps near the courtyard. Then there's another bird on the couch. Jill slowly starts to walk around and sees that there's another bird on a statue. She turns and sees that the window in the courtyard was broken and the birds are flying in through it. She then sees wet shoe prints leading out from the broken window. He escaped. Suddenly, she hears the children crying and she sees them hiding in the fireplace. It's okay, she tells them as she helps them out. They run to the front door, but they don't notice that the man is there, hiding in the shadows. The children are able to run out of the front door, but before Jill can make it out, the man grabs her from behind and throws her onto the ground before she can escape. She tries to crawl away, she tries to escape and just get out of there, but he chases after her. She manages to start running up the stairs, but he quickly grabs her leg and she's screaming and kicking at him, and they're kind of just doing like a tug of war at this point. She crawls up the stairs, he drags her down, she crawls up, he drags her down. This time he finally grabs her really hard and he pushes her against the window to kind of like knock her unconscious, and she starts fighting him back though. Like, Jill is determined to escape. So she starts fighting him off until she actually knocks him off the staircase and he falls off and she falls after him. Jill quickly gets up and runs away, but he knocks her over. She quickly gets right back up and runs through the hall with the man chasing after her. He cuts off Jill as she tries to run through the living room. He pushes her into the living room table and then pulls her onto the ground. He gets on top of her and he starts choking her. She's trying to reach for anything to help her. She reaches for a tequila bottle and she throws it at him, but she misses it and she hits the wall above the fireplace. She tries to grab the fire poker, but she can't. So she reaches for a remote that she knows leads to the fireplace. She finally gets the remote. She hits the button, causing the fire to erupt in flames, making the man kind of jump and let go of her to cover his head from the fire. Jill quickly grabs the fire poker and she stabs it through his hand and into the floor. The man lets out a terrifying scream and Jill runs to the front door, opens it up, and just runs outside until she runs straight into a police officer. Jill starts screaming and hitting the police officer in a panic. Jill, it's okay, you're safe," he says as the other officers run into the house to apprehend the man. Jill is now sitting in front of a police car with a blanket wrapped around her next to an ambulance. "How are you doing?" Officer Burrow asks her. She looks up at him and asks, "Where is he?" "We've got him. He's in the police car right over there," and he assures her that he's fully cuffed and that he has taken sedatives and that the cops will be guarding him around the clock. "That's not enough," Jill says. The officer just kind of looks at her quietly and says, "Take care, Jill," as he walks away. Jill looks over and sees that the parents returned home and that they're hugging their children tightly. She just can't believe that this really happened. I mean, she's in complete shock. This was supposed to be just a normal night of babysitting, and then somehow it turned into her fighting off this crazy man. As she's just kind of dwelling on this, the cop car with the man in it drives right next to Jill, and her eyes widen with fear as the man looks right at her. For the first time, she can clearly see his face. He looks just so creepy and evil. He has a scar across his cheek and he just stares right back at Jill. Jill stares back at the car as it drives off, and now audio clips play of a news reporter saying that a suspect was apprehended and linked to a series of murders where young women were stalked and harassed for hours. So it's clear that this guy has done this multiple times before. In the next scene, Jill is in the hospital sleeping with several balloons at the foot of her bed. One of the balloon pops and it wakes her up. She looks around, but no one is there. She buzzes for a nurse several times and then sits up and gets out of bed. She goes to the door and she looks into the hospital, but there's not a single person there. She hears a phone ring in her hospital room, so she looks at the phone, scared. It stops ringing and she relaxes. She goes to close her door, and in the mirror, she sees the killer behind her and he grabs her. Suddenly, Jill wakes up screaming from this nightmare with her dad, and two nurses are trying to restrain her. They're telling her that it's okay, that she's safe now, but she's just screaming, No, he's in the house. Dad, he's in the house. You don't understand. He's in the house." She keeps screaming as we see other people in the hospital hear her, concerned. Jill is safe, but she might not ever feel that way again, especially if the phone rings. And with that, that is when a stranger calls. I know, right? The movie was definitely so crazy. It's definitely one where kind of yelling at the main character, like, please don't do this. I feel like Jill was just never expecting the worst in any situation. And I was honestly pretty shocked that she survived in the end because she wasn't making the smartest decisions. I really didn't know how Jill was going to get saved or how she was going to get away because, again, I feel like she didn't really make the smartest decisions. I honestly thought for a while that the police would just show up and kind of save the day since she called them kind of a long time ago. So as I was watching the movie, I was like, okay, now they're gonna walk in and they're gonna save her. But no, they literally showed up at the very, very end when she basically did all the work for them. Also at the end, when the reporters were explaining that the man or the stranger was a serial killer, I was kind of hoping that they would explain why and how he picked his victims, considering how the mom Kelly said that this babysitting job was a very last minute thing. So how did the stranger know that she was going to be babysitting that night? Like maybe I'm just thinking too much about it because it is just like a silly horror movie, but like still, like I want an explanation. Throughout the movie, I kept trying to figure out like, was there a connection to her or to the family? But I guess he just picks his victims at random. Overall, I really enjoyed the movie. I especially loved how the house was like very unique and it was just so beautiful and just very different and just, it felt very mysterious. Now, do I think this is the best movie in the world? No, definitely not. There's definitely better horror movies out there, but I still think it's like a fun movie. It's very suspenseful. It's just something different. And you know, throwback movies are always so entertaining for nostalgia reasons. I will say that there are a couple of errors in the movie that didn't really make sense to me. Again, I could just be looking like too into it. For example, when the guy calls from Tiffany's phone on the cordless phone, it shows up Tiffany's ID. You know, it says call from Madison Tiffany. So I'm just wondering why her caller ID showed up, but like no one else's caller ID the entire night showed up. Especially when the police called Jill to let her know that the killer was inside the house, the call showed up as unknown. Like, why did it show up for Tiffany, but not even for the own police station? So it was just really weird, like how only her caller ID appeared. And then the biggest thing with me with the calls is like, why wasn't Jill more scared at the fact that the man was calling her from Tiffany's phone? I feel like from the moment someone called me on my friend's phone and then it was just like a man on the other end saying, this isn't Tiffany, I would have immediately already left. Like I would have grabbed the kids, I would have called the police, I would have left a voicemail for the Mandrakis being like, listen, something weird is going on, like I am leaving. So I just felt like she wasn't really like reacting correctly, especially when she thought that he was watching her from the outside. It just seems like she should have told the police more about that, like, oh, like someone just called me from my friend's phone and I think it's the man, I think he did something to her. Another thing was the guest house. Like, why was she not more terrified that she saw someone walking in the guest house? Like if I saw that, I would be like, oh, it's probably the guy watching me. Like it makes sense he's across the lake watching me. So I don't think it would really make sense that it would be the son Todd or that she would go to the house willingly just to see if it was Todd. I also want to know, like, how did the stranger get from the guest house to the main house? Like, how did he get there without like crossing paths with Jill? How did he get inside without tripping off the alarm? Like, how was he able to like get inside the house? Like, how was he able to do all of this? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like he was just always everywhere all at once. And I don't get how. Especially when he killed Tiffany, like when she was banging on the front door trying to get help, and when Jill opened the door, suddenly Tiffany was gone. Like, how did that happen so quickly? I don't know. I just wish they kind of offered some explanation as to how he got in the house so quickly and so quietly. I get that it's part of the suspense and it's part of like, I guess the horror, you know, is that he can get in the house, he can watch you without you ever knowing. So yeah, those were just like my little issues with the movie, but overall, I really liked it. I would recommend this to people if you're just looking for like a suspenseful, just like creepy movie. I would love to know what you guys think about this down below. What did you guys think about the ending? Do you think that there should have been like a sequel to this? I believe the original one, the 1979 one, does have a sequel. I'm pretty sure called When a Stranger Calls Back. I haven't watched that yet. I definitely should, just to kind of see how it all, you know, ended. But let me know what you guys think about this down below. If there are any other thriller or mystery movies that you guys want me to talk about, also make sure to leave me a comment down below. I love doing these videos. I think these videos are so fun. It's just fun to talk about something fictional and just something like silly. Like, yeah, this movie's like a scary movie, but it's also kind of silly. So anyways, thank you guys so much for being here. And before you guys leave, I would really appreciate it if you guys could hit the subscribe button down below so you guys can join the familia. Mil gracias otra vez for being here, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, familia!